Namaskar and good afternoon to everybody. It is now time for the academic session number 1 after the conclusion of the inaugural session. Professor S.K. Mohanty is temporarily absent, therefore he is not in the chair. He will be coming after some time. Let us start the proceedings. And this is the session in which the addresses of the general presidents of each of the sections, the sectional presidents of each of the sections will be presented, and the chairperson would be Professor Godavarish Mishra, the general president of this session. He is already there. On my calling, I am very sorry. He has left his lunch.
No, I'm already at it, but I'll join you. Yeah.
And he has come to the service of philosophy. I thank him and welcome him to our midst in the academic session number 2, I think, not 1. The sectional president's addresses are 3 in number: Logic and Metaphysics, Professor Dr. Jhadeswar Ghosh; History of Philosophy, Lieutenant Dr. Lakshman Patra; then Ethics and Social Philosophy, Dr. Nrushingha Samantaray. The time allotted to each of them is 30 minutes, and then the remarks of the President, Professor Mishra, will follow. I now hand over the microphone to Professor Mishra.
So, good afternoon, and I'm happy to be again back to your midst. So, without taking much of your time, let us start with the session. I see Jhadeswar and who are others? I forgot the names. Who are the others? Jhadeswar, you start with your talk on the
Jhadeswar Ghosh is Professor of Philosophy.
I know. Jhadeswar is please introduce them, Professor Das.
In Gourbang University, Kolkata.
Yeah, University. Yes.
His erudition will be shown by his presidential address. Let's go over to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Am I audible, sir?
You are audible. Go on.
You are audible, Jhadeswar.
Sir.
Yeah.
Good afternoon to a respected chairperson, Professor Godavarish Mishra, and the distinguished members of All Odisha Philosophy Association. My pranam and heartfelt gratitude to all my teachers. I am very much obliged and grateful to the Executive Committee of All Odisha Philosophy Association for giving me an opportunity to participate and learn a lot in this 34th annual session. Today, in this section, I'm going to present a paper on ontology without metaphysics, an approach to naturalistic philosophy. Metaphysics has occupied the center stage of philosophical thinking since the beginning of philosophical speculation. It has raised some of the most fundamental questions regarding the universe and man's existence in it. The origin and nature of the universe has been the most pressing problem for the metaphysicians in all ages and in all cultures. The solution of metaphysical problems have been offered by metaphysicians in the light of their varied experiences and in the context of the age in which they have lived and thought. Naturalism had its origin in Greek philosophy in the West when the philosophers sought to explain the origin of the universe in terms of the natural elements such as earth, water, fire, air, etc. However, there have been anti-naturalists in metaphysics as they find that naturalism fails to explain many aspects of reality such as the self, the values, and the self pursues and the higher things of life which human beings pursue in their individual and collective life. Therefore, there has been a metaphysical tendency to look beyond naturalism in order to find out the supernatural domain of reality. Metaphysics is basically the theory of the supreme being, ultimate reality, or the ontological absolute. So what naturalism stands for? Naturalism means different things to different people. It is impossible to offer a single precise definition of naturalism, one that captures everything that goes by the name. It is a doctrine in metaphysics and philosophy of science. It is the theory that all events happen naturally, that all are caused in strict accordance with uniform natural law, that the laws of causation never change, and that there is no cosmic teleology. Naturalism is the name of the metaphysical doctrine which holds that everything in the universe has a natural origin and that every event and object can be explained by appealing to the laws which are embedded in nature. This appeal to nature thus is the final arbiter of the ultimate explanation of reality according to naturalism. Naturalism rejects the theological and the idealist explanation of the universe because it treats the universe as a system of natural objects and law. Metaphysical naturalism is a philosophical worldview which holds that there is nothing but natural elements, principles, and relations of the kind studied by the natural sciences. Naturalists, as might be expected, give pride of place to the natural world, to nature, and the dubious or even dismissive of claims that go beyond the natural world. So-called supernatural claims. These include, most importantly, the belief that God exists, but also beliefs in other sorts of non-natural or spiritual entities such as ghosts, and for most naturalists, the human soul or spirit. So, naturalists are typically atheists who reject, among other things, mind-body dualism and etc. Such as naturalism is an ontology, it makes claim about what exists. This view is frequently called metaphysical naturalism. if we discuss the history of naturalism, the naturalistic metaphysics become prominent because of the rise of the natural sciences, which occupied the center stage of man's intellectual inquiry from the 17th century onwards. The development of modern science was crucial to the historical development of naturalism. The scientific revolution of the 17th century transformed scientific inquiry in the works of individuals such as Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler. We find an increased emphasis on experimental methods and a more extensive use of mathematics in the construction of theories, which were better at explaining the natural world than their predecessors. We find the 16th century philosopher René Descartes attempting to model philosophical inquiry on geometrical reasoning by deducing conclusion from self-evident first principles that could be known outside of experience. Similarly, Thomas Hobbes brought the methodology of geometry to philosophy in a slightly different way, attempting to synthesize and analyze the ideas that we obtain through sense experience. David Hume, generally considered one of the fathers of naturalism, brought experimental methods to bear on many areas of inquiry. Evidence for this is seen in the subtitle to his treatise of human nature, being an attempt to introduce the experimental method of reasoning into moral subjects. Sensory experiences, Hume claimed, provide the foundation for all areas of inquiry, not just science, but also logic, mathematics, morality, and politics. Another important development in the history of naturalism involved several books written on the scientific method, publication by the likes of John Herschel, John Stuart Mill, and William Whewell helped to strengthen the view that supernatural explanation did not belong in scientific work. They also helped to advance the growing interest in increasing the range of phenomena investigated through scientific methods. The dramatic and unparalleled success of science in explaining more and more of the natural world contributed to the rise of naturalism. In this regard, perhaps the most significant scientific contribution was Darwin's Origin of Species in 1859. Darwin's publication went a long way in boosting the explanatory power of non-theistic explanation of the natural world. Naturalism has become an increasingly dominant view or approach to philosophy over the course of the last century. In John Dewey's early 20th century work, Experience and Nature, he attempted to achieve continuity of both methods and results between philosophy and natural sciences. In the area of ethics, Dewey urged a thoroughly empirical study of the subject. In the second half of 20th century, Harvard philosopher William Var Orman Quine did more than perhaps any other to advance a naturalistic approach to philosophy and help bring it to dominance. Quine shared with Dewey the highest regard for the sciences and believed that philosophy should apply scientific methods to other areas of inquiry. Unlike Dewey, however, Quine claimed that the subject matter of philosophy was continuous with science. For example, instead of worrying about the justification of beliefs, Quine thought we should just study how the brain takes in sensation through the sensory organs and transforms them into beliefs. The success of science, Quine thought, provided its own justification for the claim it made. It did not need outside justification from philosophy. Thus, naturalistic metaphysics provide a consistent worldview that leaves no place for any transcendental moral or epistemic values in the world. The world is taken to be the natural and material world with all its properties, which can be known through experience. Thank you.
Hello?
Hello, sir.
Over to Professor Mishra.
Yeah, are there questions?
You can throw this to the audience for queries and responses by the author.
Let me ask you a question to initiate the discussion. Shall I?
Sir.
Yeah, please.
Sir.
Please ask.
Thank you. I think I heard Jhadeswar saying something like this, that in a naturalistic metaphysics, the distinction between body and mind is not accepted. It looks, I don't know whether it actually in naturalistic philosophy this is denied, but why do you think that mind, whether actually it is an entity or something other than an entity, should not be considered as a natural phenomenon? Do you think that mind is not a natural phenomenon? Even if mind not an entity, at least consciousness should not be considered as a natural phenomenon? And should we have a place in naturalistic metaphysics? Please, Jhadeswar.
Sir, thank you, sir. It's a very nice question, sir. Actually, naturalistic, when emergence of naturalistic trend in the arena of philosophy, their first objection is a priorical structure. So they are denying the dualism, the concept of dualism, and they are adopting the most area of experience-based knowledge. They are more akin with empiricism. Therefore, in order to like any other philosophers, like linguistic philosopher, naturalist, and those who are adopting the method of naturalist, they are also rejecting the a priorical structure of mind, consciousness, and other things. Sir.
Professor Maggi is satisfied?
No, not yet. Not really.
So,
Because it is assumed, it is really assumed that mind is something a priori in nature. Like from an epistemic point of view, it can be known through a priori, and we do not have any empirical evidence of that people have mind, or that I have mind, that others have mind. So this kind of assumption is really, I think, makes question. I mean, it's difficult. This kind of assumption can be questioned, I think.
Actually,
And
sir,
anyway,
another way is known as, they are known as physicalists. Therefore, they are denying the concept of a priorical structure of mind.
okay, so a priori structure of mind is denied, but empirical something, no, like Gilbert mind may be denying the ghost in the machine, but does he deny that there is experience, there is consciousness? I don't think they deny. Even everybody who are denying mind as an entity, they are saying that no. Even David Chalmers, for example, the
Yes,
Chalmers,
sir. Yes, David Chalmers is also
they
a great naturalistic. So all naturalistic.
so they accept
They accept.
consciousness, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Only thing that a priori existence of mind, or some sense of a priori existence of mind, is denied.
Yeah.
But
Their objection is a priorical structure, but they are adopting mind, they are adopting consciousness and moral grounds, like ethical grounds. So there are various forms of naturalism, sir.
Okay, so you saying that there is possibility in naturalistic metaphysics, the possibility of a conception of mind which is non-a priori in nature. So you accept that?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine.
Dr. Jhadeswar,
Sir.
are the physical scientists physicalists or naturalists?
Sir, actually they are physicalist, and they claim themselves they are physicalist because they are adopting the rigorous method of empiricism. Therefore, they believe in physics. They believe in physicalistic view.
Not naturalistic view.
Sir.
Not naturalistic view.
Sir, also naturalistic view. Their naturalism is based on the scientific method. The sign. Yes, sir.
How do
I have a point. What about the behaviorists? Are the behaviorists naturalists?
Yes, sir.
Or do they deny this kind of thing?
Yes, sir. Behaviorist also naturalist. They are behaviorist,
distinguish
naturalist
behaviorist?
conception of knowledge. They are adopting behaviorist, also naturalist.
Hello.
There are some two questions
hello.
in the message box. Saroj has asked one and Sumit Janti has asked one. I think I have a question.
Okay, I'm communicating to Jhadeswar Ghosh. A question by Saroj Kantkar that Descartes was a natural philosopher, but logically derived the God logically. What is your view about this from your modern naturalist point of view?
Thank you, Saroj. It's a very nice question, Dr. Saroj Kantkar. Yes, Descartes logically derived the idea of God But when deriving the idea of God, Descartes adopting the a priorical structure, therefore, it is very much objectionable by the naturalist.
A question to Soros, why do you say that Descartes was a natural philosopher? What do you mean by this? Descartes was a natural philosopher. What do you mean by this? Descartes was... Soros, please.
Sir, Descartes was already accepted by all that he is a mathematician, he is a natural philosopher, and he is a metaphysician. He was a natural philosopher because he was experimenting so many things regarding the experiment with the dissecting of dogs and other things to find out the pineal gland and the connection between mind body. So from this point of view, people have accepted that he is a natural philosopher. And also mathematics at that time was considered as natural philosophy. So
yes, that is true. But when he proves that there is a mind, he was arguing a priori, on logical grounds, that if there is a thinker, if you think there must be a thinker. That so thinking is something which is empirical, natural. But from this, imagining a soul, that there is a mind or a person who is doing all these things, that is departs from naturalistic philosophy, and that is what I think Jhadeswar was trying to emphasize. These are for your observations and for Jhadeswar's.
Actually, yes, Descartes is also in 16th century initiated the movement of naturalism. But
at that time, this concept of naturalistic movement was not there. This is recent that came after that. So say that Descartes is a natural philosopher, again would be very misleading.
Yeah, when he is adopting the scientific method of geometry, like Greek philosophers, Descartes adopting the method of geometry. So these are the basic things a naturalist follow that they are the founder of the movement of naturalism. But Descartes adopting when he going to prove the existence of God, adopting the a priorical structure or a priorical method like his innate idea. So naturalists are denying the innate form of knowledge and a priorical structure. Therefore,
okay, these questions are for you to deliberate and ponder. Professor Madhi has raised a very good point, and Professor also has raised. And any other question, you can just proceed. You can.
Sir, I have a question. Sir, I am Sumit Raut from University of Hyderabad. I am a PhD scholar over here. May I ask you one question to Professor Jhadeswar?
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Professor, for the talk. I mean, it's indeed a good talk. But like, I have some query about the talk. I mean, the thing is that like when you talk about natural kinds, I mean, when you talk about, I mean, natural philosophy, it is obvious that natural kinds will come. I mean, the talk of natural kind will occur. So I just want to know that how do we know that there exists natural, I mean, kind, like for say philosophers like Putnam and Kuhn would say that I mean we are the one who like applies our like category to the world, and therefore we know they I mean we category, like we apply our category, our mental category to know the things. I mean, so I mean that is not clear in your talk. I mean, how do we know that there exists I mean natural kind in the world? So could you please I mean just clarify? Thank you, sir.
Actually, what do you mean by natural kind? Clarify me.
Natural kind in the sense like I mean when we say like that, I mean, when we say that there exists something like apart from our mind in the world, there exists something apart from our mind in the world. So, I mean, in the sense, do we apply our category to know that thing which is like which exists outside, or like I mean the or things are already structured there, and we just like discover those things. So this is not clear in your talk. I mean, sort of query. If you could like clarify
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Actually, if I understand your point, then
Yeah.
I think naturalists always objection towards supernatural things. So they are not adopting outside the category or like the entities of supernatural. So if you satisfy or not,
He is
No,
not.
sir.
He is not raising
No.
the question of supernatural things.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
is
yeah. That is
saying
what I'm
what he
not
is saying
asking
boils
the.
down to this. Boils down to this. There is a grass in nature. There are cows
Yeah,
in
that.
nature. There are
Yeah, that is what.
human beings in nature. So that human beings trained cows. Any language anywhere would take cognition of this and say that there is grass in nature. There are men in nature. Is it like that?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean,
There might be another language system in which one will
yeah,
say
I
there
mean,
is no grass, there is no straw, there is only fodder in the world.
that is what.
That
Like,
could be the
well, like,
category.
yeah, yeah. I want to know, like, is there anything outside our like our mind, and we apply our categories like to know those things. Like, I mean, Kuhn would say that like if you go through internal realism, Kuhn would say that it is our conceptual scheme by which we know things. But on the other hand, like the realist, I mean, in general, they would say that no, things are already structured out there, and we just want to know those things. So that I mean, natural philosophy would, natural philosophy, I mean, by default, it would raise the questions of natural kind, you know. So, I mean, this is not clear in your talk. So, could you please clarify these things? I mean, how do we know that there is things like exist outside? Natural things. I mean, so
actually
how do we know?
naturalistic those who are adopting the naturalistic method, they are always opposing the concept of outside of mind, but they are adopting several nature of natural things.
Sir,
But
sir, 1 second. I have one subtle question here. If they, I mean, if they deny things like, if they deny that no, there is no things exist outside, doesn't it seem like idealism? I mean everything exists in our mind. So in a way, like naturalism reduces to idealism. I mean, kind of, sort of. I mean, so I mean, naturalist philosophy like makes a way out for this idealism. If you say so, like there is nothing outside, everything like structured by our mind. So kind of idealism, like the idealist philosophy comes into picture.
Yeah, I think what Sumit is driving to your attention is whether naturalistic metaphysicians will they accept Kuhn's point of view or Putnam's point of view?
No, Putnam and Kuhn, I mean, Putnam and Kuhn, I mean, they are like in a way they are internalist, and they say there are things outside, and we know those things by applying our conceptual scheme. So I don't like, I mean, I
I
don't
don't think Putnam
go
will
the.
Putnam has this kind of view. Putnam is a realist, no? Uh, Kuhn is talking about subjective schema, which
Yeah.
superimposed on the reality, right?
Yes, sir.
But Putnam is a realist who thinks that the things are there and our
want to discover.
epistemic system or our categories capture what is there.
Those things.
So
yeah.
So they cannot be international. Both cannot be internalist.
Okay, sir. So like I have this to Professor Jhadeswar. No, I mean that natural kind. I mean, what I am asking is, how do we know things outside? I mean, how do we know that things exist outside? That is not clear in your talk. So, I mean, there is a bit confusion. I mean, for me, I don't know about others. At least for me, I mean, that point is not clear. If you could, I mean, clarify.
Maybe the Kantian position may be right here. I feel, I don't know if I'm right. All those objects which are subject to the categories of our understanding, they can only be known. Not that the mind approaches the objects, rather the objects which satisfy the conditions laid by the categories of understanding, they are known to us. So that way, maybe we can resolve this position by taking the Kantian notion.
But Jhadeswar has not brought in that point. Jhadeswar has not brought in
that
point.
is what, like Professor Ganesh sir rightly pointed out that thing. I mean, Professor Jhadeswar has not clearly, I mean, mentioned that thing. No, so if you could.
Actually, in my talk, I am concentrating what naturalism stands for and what are the historical background of naturalistic metaphysics, and they are doing ontology but without metaphysics. So all these things I am trying to concentrate within 30 minutes.
Okay, sir. All right, sir.
Okay,
thank you,
let us
sir.
hand over the platform to Professor Mishra.
Thank you, Professor Jhadeswar, for the nice talk. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Don't you think that naturalism is a form of reductionism?
Naturalism is not a form of reductionism, sir. Actually, yes, sir. No, why not? Yes, logical positivist. Actually, logical positivist. And they are adopting the scientific method. After 20th century philosopher William Bard Orman coined camps, then he called it a second dogma, reductionism, because he called it second dogma because we obey the reductionist form, then we cannot help, or we are not proceed towards construction of a theory. So it is a obstacles, sir.
Right, all right, that will do. We can't have a longer discussion. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Like for your clarification. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Question in the chat box by Minaki Sethi, where she said that
in Indian context, especially in the case of first
evolute of Prakriti is Purusha. Is it correct? She says that the first evolute of Prakriti is Purusha. Purusha is
in Sankhya it says that
complete misrepresentation of Sankhya.
Uncaused to root cause of everything. It means no one produced Prakriti. Prakriti produced everything. Then my question is,
in the chat box,
produced Purusha, the first conscious and intelligent self? Is it through natural process or any other process is working here?
Okay, take note of these questions and we'll proceed to others because there are so many others. But this is a very represents first evolute of Prakriti is Purusha. I don't think this is correct. Purusha is not an evolute.
the two realities of science.
Okay.
It's the last one because Purusha comes into picture at the 25th place. That is how the evolution takes place.
Evolution takes place when Prakriti comes in contact with Purusha, but Purusha is not an evolute. Okay, Vasant Kumar Das has raised his hand. Vasant Babu, कौन कहବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି?
No, sir, I have nothing to say. Sachin Babu has another question in the chat box.
Sachin Babu,
What are Descartes' laws of nature?
As he discussed, Jhadeswar has discussed these questions. If not, then he raised questions which are raised by Jhadeswar so that he can answer. What are the Descartes' laws of nature?
Now, when he has called him a naturalist, so if he has, to his credit, any law of nature, he must state.
Okay.
At least Descartes has two laws. One is there is no action at a distance. That is one of the laws of Descartes. Then another is there is as much reality in the cause as it is in the effect. That is another.
So thank you, sir.
So, Godavarish,
It was a good presentation, Jhadeswar. You had to face a lot of questions and answered very well. One more thing I just wanted to tell you, the whole evolution of science in the later days has in some way, dependent on the very idea and the processes that went after the problem of naturalism, which is why science came to be known as natural philosophy. So thank you very much, and let us go to the next speaker. One thing I wanted to tell you, somebody told that Prakriti, Purusha is one of the evolute. It is an independent autonomous principle like that of Prakriti, in Samkhya. So it is not one of the evolutes, as somebody has already given the clarification. With this, let us go to the next speaker.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Next speaker, please, Professor Das. Who is the next speaker? Please introduce him also.
Next speaker is Dr. Lakshman Patra. He presides
So we
over
are waiting for your deliberation, Lakshman, and so thank you for all the trouble you have taken in organizing such a great, grand meet over the virtual platform. And over to Lakshman. Yeah, Dr. Lakshman Behera, right?
No, sir, Patra.
Oh, sorry, Lakshman Patra. Sorry.
And he is the man behind all these things.
I know that. I know that's what Professor Das told. Everybody spoke. Like on behalf of everybody, we thank you, Dr. Lakshman Patra. Hope we have not met any time. There will be some occasion to meet in future. Yeah.
Sir, sir.
So you have contributed a lot to Karma Yajna and now to Jnana Yajna.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I respected chairperson, Professor Godavarish Mishra, my teachers, Professor Saroj Kumar Mahanti, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, and other dignitaries, my dear students, participants. I am very fortunate that AOPA has given the assignment of the section presidential address and the section history of philosophy. Though I was busy, still I am trying to present my paper as per my knowledge. My paper entitled a critical method in philosophy and postmodern critical theory. In this paper,
will you please repeat the name once again?
A critical method in philosophy and postmodern critical theory.
Okay.
I will start my paper from the Wittgenstein and will end my paper with Wittgenstein. That philosophy is not one of the natural sciences. The result of philosophy is not a number of philosophical propositions, but to make proposition clear, says Wittgenstein. Philosophy is an important branch of human knowledge. It is an effort to understand the world systematically and holistically. The conception of philosophy and approaches of philosophy have been varied with the social context. Western philosophy has been constructed on certain propositions. So this paper explores some of the basic methods of Western philosophy with a historical note. The Western philosophy has taken its starting point from Greco-Roman philosophy. It is followed by medieval thought, which is mostly influenced by religion. The modern Western philosophy has not only critical about orthodox religion, but also came with ideals of secularism, humanism, scientific temperament, progress and development, skepticism, rationality, individualism, and scientific methods are influenced the human conception in understanding the world. The Western philosophy under the spell of modernity has an impact on the non-Western world too. This has been coincided with the colonial rule of Western over Afro-Asian nations. However, Western modernity has a different meanings and implication for the world. In recent times, the methods and foundation of Western philosophy and its ideals of modernity has been attacked in West and outside by the thinkers of postmodern, post-colonial, and communitarians. The objective of this paper is to make familiar the methods of Western philosophy. The philosophical ideas have to be understood historically. The social context plays a crucial role in understanding the ideas of philosophers, social. In fact, our ideas emerge out of social tensions and chaos of the world. Philosophy is an expression of this situation and provides comprehensive understanding of social reality. Philosophical ideas not only provide clarification, but also lead for betterment of life. In other words, philosophers promote a direction for humanity by providing the comprehensive and critical understanding of the world in which they live. Historically, Western philosophy has been enriched by many philosophers of Western countries. So now my point is that at first I will discuss what is the method. Philosophical method is a combination of rules, assumptions, procedures, and examples determining the scope and limits of a subject and establishing acceptable ways of working within those limits to achieve truth. Though the aim of philosophy is to know the truth, to know the reality. So the question of philosophical method is itself a matter for philosophy and constitute a major example of the reflective nature of the subject. Historically, the philosophers disagree about the appropriate philosophical method. The identifying mark of a philosophical school or movement lies mainly on the method it adopts. Ancient philosophy was developed according to various interpretations of a dialectic method, and modern philosophy was initiated by Descartes' method of doubt. Analytic philosophy was characterized by linguistic method, while non-analytic European philosophy is characterized by phenomenological, historical, and textual method. Historically, philosophers have tried to model their work on the methods of successful sciences such as mathematics, physics, biology, psychology, and computer science. But the appropriate relationship between philosophical and scientific method is a matter of dispute. Some philosophers draw methodological implication from the claim that philosophy is a part of science or ancillary to science, while others derive their account of philosophical method from the claim that philosophy is prior to science. So there are the different methods like speculative method, dialectic method, reiterative method, scholastic method, Cartesian method, empiricist method, critical method, analytic method, pragmatic method, phenomenological method, and therapeutic method by Wittgenstein. I will discuss one by one. At first, I will discuss. I want to discuss about the speculative method. This method was developed in 6th century BC. The intellectual development reached its climax in Athens as the various stream of Greek thought converged there during the 5th century BC. The age of Pericles saw Athens at the peak of its cultural creativity and political influence. The development of democracy and a technical advance in agriculture and navigation encouraged humanistic spirit and speculative method. Pre-Socratic philosophers had been relatively isolated in their speculation. Now in Athens, such philosophical speculation became more representative of the city's intellectual life as a whole, which continued to move toward the conceptual thought, critical analysis, reflection, and dialectic. These are the speculative method. Next, the dialectic method. The dialectic is a method used to form of reasoning by finding out contradiction or opposites. It is classified into negative and positive dialectic. The negative dialectic as a method was used by Socrates. It consists in expressing the inconsistency or self-contradiction involved in opinions and thereby destroying them. The positive dialectic method was adopted by Hegel. It is essentially a process of reconciliation or unification. Hegel maintained that human thought proceeds dialectically. Its movement involves a process of contradiction and a reconciliation. An idea can be understood only in relation to opposite or contradictory. Heidegger's phenomenological method views philosophy is the study of phenomena, where phenomena referring to whatever shows itself. Phenomena are not mere appearance, but those things which show themselves to consciousness. Next is a retrospective method developed by the Augustine. Towards the end of the patristic period, Augustine tried to answer the problem of certainty with his method of retrospect. He held that the skeptics are mistaken in assuming that certainty of knowledge is impossible, and that human can achieve only probable knowledge, that is, ideas whose validity is highly probable. Since any degree of probable knowledge implies an approach toward completely certain knowledge, the assumption of probably valid truths presupposes the existence and attainability of absolute truth. If the skeptics argue that no real object of his sense experience exists, nevertheless he cannot doubt the fact that his perception does exist. The person who doubts all truth is caught in the logical dilemma. For one must exist in order to doubt. In fact, no matter what else can doubt, one proves one's own existence through the act of doubting. Nor is it any use of suggest that one might err in thinking that one exists, for even if one errors, one exists. So, believing is to think with consent. It is an assent to something without full of rational clarity. The function of faith in Augustine philosophy is simple to serve as a beginning, to put one's feet on the right way in the quest for understanding. Faith is always the necessary prerequisite for correct understanding. I believe that I may understand. Faith is the starting point of all growth in understanding and the gateway to truth. That is, understanding is the reward of faith. The next method is developed, that is Scholastic Method. It is developed by the Thomas Aquinas. The Scholastic Method, a creative synthesis of several previous methods of Thomas Aquinas, further supported the Augustinian view of certainty. Thomas was certain of concepts having their foundation in the sense perception. He accepted Abelard's view of the relationship between universal and particulars, including the Aristotelian thesis that Plato's universal can be found only in particular things, which thus become actualities detectable in sense experience. For Aquinas, too, the universal nature, the essence of thing, exists immanently in the object itself as a part of the real world. But this universal characteristic is also an idea or a concept separated from its object when it is abstracted by the human mind. As a part of the real world, the universal essence never exists independently of its object. Yet, before nature was created, the universal exists in the mind of God as archetypes or ideas which God used in creating the universe. The next method is developed by the Descartes, that is known as the Cartesian method. The Descartes was also bothered by the same question of certainty. He became fascinated by the question of whether there was anything we could know for certain. He distinguishes between certainty and truth. For him, certainty is a state of mind, whereas truth is a property of statement, which usually relates to the way of things are out there in the external world. But Descartes believed that only if one had grounds for certainty could one know that one had hold of the truth. The pursuit of truth involves the pursuit of certainty. He wanted that the method he was looking for would have to be one which not only delivered the goods in the form of worthwhile conclusion, but could also defend itself against the arguments of skeptics. So he engaged himself in what might be called preemptive skepticism, by which he wanted to put the foundation of knowledge beyond the reach of skepticism. He did it in the three stages. First, he laid aside the things that just an ordinary commonsensical ground one might possibly find doubtful. For instance, he reminded himself of such well-known facts as that straight sticks can look bent in water, but he wanted to go beyond such ordinary kind of doubt. Second, he doubted that any given moment he was awake and perceiving anything at all, for he had often dreamed in the past that he was perceiving things, and when he was dreaming, he had thought that he was seeing people or tables or whatever around him. But of course, he had woken up and found it was an illusion. Third, he imagined a malignant spirit whose sole intent was to deceive him as much as it could. However, the point at which the doubt stopped is the reflection that he is himself engaged in thinking. No malicious demon can make one to believe that one is thinking when one is not. If one has to false thought, that is still a thought. So the fundamental first certainty was, I think, therefore I am. Next method is empiristic method. It was developed, advocated by Locke, Berkeley, and Hume, that all essential truths about the world were discoverable only by empirical experience. Thus, reason was substituted by the empirical experience. It was above all John Locke who set the tone for empiricist method by affirming the foundational principle of empiricism. There is nothing in the intellect that was not previously in the senses. All knowledge of the world must rest finally on human sense experience. Through the combining and compounding of simple sense impression or ideas as a mental into more complex concepts, the mind can arrive at a sound conclusion. The mind is at first a blank tablet, a passive receptor of its experience. The mind possesses innate powers, but not innate ideas, as cognition begins only with the sensation. The next method is developed by the critical method. It was adapted by the philosopher Kant. That is, the intellectual challenge that faced Kant was seemingly impossible one. On the one hand, and to reconcile the claims of science to certain and genuine knowledge of the world with the claim that experience could never give rise to such knowledge. On the other hand, to reconcile the claim of a religion that human was morally free with the claim of science that nature was entirely determined by necessary laws. With these several conflicting claims, an intellectual crisis of profound complexity had emerged. Kant's method of resolution of that crisis was equally complex, brilliant, and weighty in its consequences. According to Kant, the human mind does not passively receive sense data, but it actively structures them. Human, therefore, knows objective reality to the extent that reality conforms to the fundamental structures of the mind. All human knowledge of the world is channeled through the mind's own categories. The necessity and certainty of scientific knowledge are embedded in the mind's perception and understanding of the world. The mind does not conform to objects, rather objects conform to the mind. Human can attain certain knowledge of the world not because one has the power to penetrate to and grasp the world in itself, but because the world is saturated with the principles of one's own mental organization. Hence, human could know things only as they appear, not as they are in themselves. A genuine philosophical method should investigate the formal structure of the mind and analyze the nature and the limits of human reason. Although reason cannot decide matters transcendent experience, it can determine what cognitive factors are interesting to all human experience and inform all experience with its order. Next method is analytical method. This analytic philosophy refers to various contemporary methods of analyzing the language. Other name for it are the philosophical analysis, logical analysis, or scientific philosophy. The names logical positivism, scientific empiricism, and new positivism refer to the tendency within analytic philosophy which has its main target the verification principle. That is, the criterion of truth consists in its capacity of being verified by sense experience. The second branch of the analytic philosophy is the linguistic analysis, as it emphasizes the analysis of the language used in philosophy. The verification principle and a language analysis are not incompatible. Both can be found in one moment. Furthermore, one should not confuse analytic philosophy with symbolic logic. The latter is a system of expressing the rules of correct thinking through mathematical symbols instead of using words as a traditional logic. Symbology is the only instrument of philosophy rather than a philosophical position, although its use is strongly advocated by the most analytical philosopher to avoid some ambiguous proper to conventional words. It is not required by all philosophical analysis. Next method is pragmatic method. Pragmatism is a philosophical method founded by the three American philosophers, C.S. Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. Peirce argued that the function of inquiry is not to represent reality, but rather enable us to act more effectively. He was critical of the copy theory of knowledge, which had dominated philosophy since the times of Descartes. He was also one of the first philosophers to say that the ability to use sign as a sign is essential to thought. Peirce's thought was further extended by the James, whose the principles of psychology broke with the associationism of Locke and Hume. James held that the truth is only the expedient in our way of thinking. Truth is what works, not merely an idea of a harmony between thought and the things. Since one could make a judgment about this only by means of thought, and the things are accessible only within thought. Ideas are true to the extent that they help us to enter into satisfactory relationship with the other parts of our experience. James and Dewey both wanted to reconcile philosophy with Darwin by making human beings' pursuit of the true and the good continuous with the activities of other lower animals. Dewey criticized the Cartesian notion of the self as a substance which existed prior to language and culture, and substituted an account of the self as a product of social practices. Dewey, whose primary interests were in cultural, educational, political reform rather than in specifically philosophical problems, developed in the implication of pragmatism for ethics and social philosophy. The next method is the phenomenological method. The main objective of the phenomenological method is the analyzing and depending of the range of our immediate experience under the watchword to things themselves. Its interpretation may vary, but the common concern is that of giving the phenomena a fuller and a fairer hearing than traditional empiricism has accorded them. Negatively, it expresses a revolt against an approach in philosophy that takes its point of departure from crystallized beliefs and theories handed down by tradition, which often perpetuates preconception and prejudice. In this respect, phenomenology stands for a kind of a rebellion against the trend in the modern science, which begins with the simplifying abstraction and ends with the minimum vocabulary of scientific concepts. The last one is the therapeutic method, which was used by the Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein attempted to devise a philosophical method to suit his conception of philosophy. For him, philosophy is not a collection of doctrines, but rather an activity. It is the activity of clarification, And through this activity of clarification in the Tractatus, Wittgenstein attempt to draw the boundary between saying and showing. In his later philosophy, he used certain psychological terms to describe the nature of philosophical activity like mental cramp, mental illness, etc. He advocated a therapeutic method in philosophy. In this method, philosophical problems are dissolved by paying attention to the actual use of language in different language using activity. No new information is supplied. This method has a parallelism with the Zeno method of sudden illumination. Wittgenstein advocated the view that just a different illness requires different therapy. Similarly, philosophy too requires various methods. Wittgenstein's method in philosophy has a certain distinct features. Basically, in spite of certain changes in philosophical approach and conclusion, Wittgenstein stuck to one distinct method of philosophy. This is basically the method of, we can say, elucidation, or as a method of elucidation, as a method, it is endorsed in both the Tractatus and the philosophical investigation. Looking from the point of view, the impact, we may call it is a therapeutic method. This method is connected with the idea that philosophical problem is the nature of a mental puzzle, which is sometimes called by Wittgenstein a mental knot. To unite the knot and to remove philosophical puzzle, we have to pay attention to the actual use of language. The wrong type of philosophy that Wittgenstein wanted to reject is philosophy full of puzzles arising out of our failure to understand the logic of language. The removal of mental knots required a method which Wittgenstein characterized as a therapeutic method by using a medical metaphor. As an analytic philosopher, Wittgenstein was greatly influenced by the philosophy legacy of Frege and Russell, but neither Russell nor Frege advocate any of the therapeutic method, and here lies the distinctives of the philosophical method of Wittgenstein. In fact, in the Tractatus, Wittgenstein's concept of philosophy is closely connected with the idea of a philosophical method. Negatively speaking, Wittgenstein did not conceive philosophy as a body of a doctrine. His view fundamentally differs from the view of many other philosophers. Positively speaking, he regarded philosophy as an activity. This activity is the activity of clarification or elucidation of thought. The method of philosophy understood as an activity is basically a method of clarification. The close link between Wittgenstein's concept of philosophy and his concept of philosophical method is clearly brought out in the following sentence of Tractatus. In 4.111, Wittgenstein said that philosophy is not one of the natural science. The word philosophy must mean something whose place is above or below the natural science, not beside them. 4.112 said that philosophy aims at the logical clarification of thoughts. Philosophy is not a body of doctrine, but an activity. So philosophy does not result in philosophical proposition, but rather the clarification of proposition. Without philosophy, thoughts are as it were cloudy, indistinct. Its task is to make clear and to give them sharp boundaries. Wittgenstein also had in mind the idea of the goal of his philosophical method of elucidation. For him, elucidation is nothing but clarification, and the goal of the method of this clarification is setting a limit to thought. From clarification of proposition, we so to say move outward and ultimately stand metaphorically at the boundary of thought. Philosophy sets limit to much disputed sphere of the natural science. It must set limits to what can be thought, and in doing so, what cannot be thought. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Godavarish sir ଅଛନ୍ତି? ସୌର ସାର୍ ଅଛନ୍ତି ତ? ଗୋଦାବରିଶ ଆସିଲେ।
ଗୋଦାବରିଶ ତ କେହି ନାହାନ୍ତି।
ଆସିଲେ ନା। ଆସିଲେ ତାଙ୍କ ପିଲାଙ୍କୁ ସମ୍ଭାଳନ୍ତୁ। ଗୋଦାବରୀ ସାର୍, ହ୍ୟାଲୋ, ଆପଣ ସରୋଜ ସାର୍ ଆସନ୍ତୁ। ଆପଣ ସାର୍ କଣ କରିଦେବୁ?
Any question on this, Lakshman?
ପ୍ରଶାନ୍ତ ଆରୁ କାହା କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ୍?
କୋ ମେଥଡ ଆପ୍ଲାଏ କରିଛ?
କହୁନ ଯେତେ ରକମ ମେଥଡ ଅଛି ଫିଲୋସଫିରେ, ତମେ କୋଉ ମେଥଡ ଆଣିଲ କହୁନ? It appears to me that Lakshman has applied or adopted rather the analytic descriptive method.
Analytic method, analytic descriptive.
He has described certain things and taken up certain concepts for analysis.
Actually PPT ଗୋଟେ ବନେଇଥିଲି ହେଇ ପାରିଲାନି, କମ୍ପ୍ଲିଟ ହେଇ ପାରିଲାନି, ନହେଲେ PPT ଭାବି ଦେଖିଥିଲି।
So shall I ask one thing? Hello.
Sir.
Ranjito Kunan,
is it just a historical development of the different methods, rationalistic, then empiricistic, then critical, then phenomenological, as you have mentioned? So from amongst all these methods, which method will be more acceptable to us?
Wittgenstein's method, therapeutic method.
Therapeutic method.
From my point of view.
So this is your point of view.
Sir.
Okay, then another thing, you have stopped at phenomenological then, but the critical method has turned into a critical theory by the critical theorist. You have mentioned initially about the postmodern modernism. So you have to mention Habermas. Okay, so Habermas's critical theory, which puts forward an ideology critique. That means what is that ideology critique? That which appears to us as self-evident can be put into test, or we can criticize it. So that type of critical theory, which is prevalent in social and political theories these days, and also it can be employed in our everyday deliberations. That type of critical theory or ideology critique, that means we are not ready to accept anything as self-evident, anything as acceptable. We just put questions. So how do you think that this method can be put into your scheme of things? Thank you.
Sir, the philosophical method should investigate the formal structure of the mind and analyze the nature and the limits of the human regime. So the region cannot decide the matters transcending the experience. It can determine what cognitive factors are interesting to all human experience and inform all experience with its order.
ब्रेकफास्ट में ब्रेड, चाउमीन, मैगी, इस तरह की चीजें, बिस्किट और चॉकलेट। हमारे जो बच्चे इस टाइम जो खाना खा रहे हैं, उससे उनकी बॉडी की इम्यूनिटी वीक हो रही है, उनको शुगर आने का खतरा बढ़ रहा है। दूसरा, हमारे घरों में बच्चों की एक्सरसाइज नहीं है, सारा दिन बैठे रहेंगे और कंप्यूटर पे आजकल फेसबुक और व्हाट्सएप और मोबाइल का जो टाइम है ना,
What is that? Where from sound came?
से जने पार्टिसिपेंट से अनम्यूट करी गाड़ी चलाउछन्ती।
ଫିଲୋସଫି କଲା ବେଳେ କୌଣସି ଜିନିଷ ଯଦି ଥଣ୍ଡା ଅବସ୍ଥାରେ ଥୁଆ ଯାଇଛି, ରେଫ୍ରିଜରେଟରରେ ଥୁଆ ଯାଇଛି, ତାକୁ କାଢି ଆଣିକିରି ତାକୁ ନର୍ମାଲ ଟେମ୍ପରେଚରରେ ଥୋଇକିରି କାରବାର କରିବା କଥା। Sometimes that might go into the construction of a theory on the basis of the critical method, but there could be piecemeal analysis also, as the situation demands. There are many kinds of analysis, piecemeal analysis, then area analysis, group of concept analysis, then total analysis. Austin says piecemeal analysis. Then Gilbert Ryle says area analysis, one area concept. Then Strauss's analysis, totalistic analysis, like this. So Wittgenstein says that there are indeed methods insofar as there are therapies. There is not one therapy for all the diseases that there are. Similarly, there is not just one method for all the queries arising in philosophy.
Sir, one thing, sir. In the postmodern world, where some sort of model, some sort of structure, there is no particular method that we can see, that we can adopt, that we can practice. No foundation to what we call a structure, is what we call a model. So there is a complete breakdown that we take as the situation demands. So how do we Wittgenstein in the postmodern structure?
Structure without a method?
There is no method. No method. Because in postmodernism, we don't talk of any structure. There is no foundation. There is no fixed model. We are not talking of any model. We are taking the situation, things as the situation demands. So without any specific model in mind, how to take things? How do you see this?
Structuralists depend upon one particular structure and setting aside all other structures. Foundationalists, they depend on one foundation. But the critical philosopher would not stick to one structure or one foundation. There will be varieties of foundations, varieties of structures, depending on the need, depending on experience. No, I take it in that way.
So the thing is, in the critical theory that is forwarded by Jürgen Habermas, and there what we find that he is providing an ideology critique. That means if you take Wittgenstein and you take this toolbox method, then he will also put it into into question, because if that toolbox method or therapeutic analysis becomes the benchmark, or it becomes something as self-evident, then it can also be put into question. That is what the postmodernists also have adopted this method, and they have they tried to apply this method into the social and political situations. This is what
if it creates any dilemma, if it creates any puzzle in the understanding of things, if it just becomes inadequate to explain, then only it will be put to criticism, and some other alternative could be found out. But if it works, then why should it be put on question?
Sir, I have a question, sir. Sir, may
Ranjit sir, please unmute, sir. Please unmute. Ranjit sir, please unmute, sir. Sir, you are speaking something. Please unmute, sir.
Sorry. Then if that be the case, then we have to go with Wittgenstein, that the workability and that which works is true. That is what also the pragmatist version.
That is William James, not Wittgenstein.
Pragmatism of William James. And then if that Wittgenstein and William James is to be taken into account, then postmodernism, why should they criticize? But they want to put everything in the structure of critique. Therefore,
in my in my understanding, these postmodern philosophers, mostly coming from the area of non-philosophy, they have put so many footnotes to Wittgenstein's philosophical investigations. They have not put up parallel or alternative viewpoints, they have just elaborated the points put forward in the philosophical investigations, in the length and breadth of philosophical investigation. There are many things, so they have put up their own footnotes. That is my understanding. But the rest of the things, over to Lakshman.
Manoranjan sir will ask.
Sir, I have a question.
Patra.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshman Patra, for your wonderful presentation. Vast study from the modern philosophy, from the pre-modern to the that is called modern, and modern to analytic, analytic to the post-analytic, that is post-structuralism. So I have a question. So what is the basic difference between the analytic method and therapeutic method? So Wittgenstein has adopted both method, or he has adopted only the analytic and left the therapeutic, and adopted the therapeutic and left the analytic?
I think they started with the analytical method and ended with the therapeutic method.
Then
they have adopted both.
Then when he adopted the therapeutic method, so do you think that the analytical method was left out, or
no. Nothing is left out in the philosophy. Every method has importance.
Okay.
If we have to take this thing seriously, then probably therapeutic method in Wittgenstein's discourse, therapeutic, the toolbox method comes first, then the analytic method, which he expounds in the latter version, that is in PI. So Tractatus comes first, then PI. That it is just the opposite one.
Bilkul.
Sir, if you see the recent study, because some Wittgensteinian, they read from the therapeutic approach from early to later. So they have seen that there is a therapeutic approach which has been seen from early to later.
Now, Wittgenstein therapeutic method সেটা কোন কেবল 20th century philosophy को applied ki? You can see the whole of philosophy right from Socrates to Sartre from that point of view.
I have a confusion here. Just I was away for some work, so I couldn't really follow all the details of Dr. Patra was saying. But just listening to these methods, analytic method, therapeutic method, is Wittgenstein talking about therapeutic method or therapeutic approach to philosophy? Analytical method is a method of resolving philosophical problems. And because of that, there will be a therapeutic result in which philosophy is restricted. Philosophical investigations are restricted to get out of the maladies that have been affected in philosophy. So philosophers are left with a restricted job of cleansing their ignorance. So why you are ascribing it as a therapeutic method?
Call upon ko. Ramsar kon koile. Bol kotha koile.
ঠিক আছে. Actually, there is a difference between method and approach.
I think so. There is a difference between saying it something a method and approach.
Sir. So analytic
method ଗୋଟେ କଣ ଅଛି କି? Therapeutic କଥା ଯୋଉ କହିଲେ, that is
the objective of philosophy.
That is a way of describing what methods are. therapies.
a,
As there are therapies, so there are methods. So it is an analogy drawing from medical science to philosophy. There is not one therapy, there are different therapies for different diseases. So it is the Lazarus and wisdom who take up this point, and they have approached some philosophical problems from the therapeutical analytical point of view. Therapeutic analysis is the method. Analysis, philosophical analysis of various colors. Therapeutical analysis is one of them.
Thank you, sir.
Entire history of philosophy, we find just the therapeutic approach. It is not they have not used method, but analytic method. Analysis is a method. So that is what Professor Majhi is referring. That therapeutic of the toolbox theory, that Tractarian position he leaves and proceeds further in his next, that is the philosophical investigations.
Toolbox ta bhi PI Tractor doesn't know.
But it started with this, and then he proceeded on to that. So approach is therapeutic is an approach, but analysis is a method, analytic method. This is what I want to say.
Analysis is sometimes qualified by the word therapeutic analysis. Analysis is done in order to provide a therapy for a philosophical problem which has become a disease, so to say.
Yes. That should be seen from Udian point of view.
Right.
Sir, this is a this is therapeutic reading. When you talk about the therapeutic reading, some Wittgensteinian like Phil Hitchinson, he said that one can see the therapeutic approach from if you read Tractatus. Therapeutic approach is also visible in the Tractatus when Wittgenstein claims that philosophical problems are conceptual problems and they cannot be solved, they can be dissolved when the problems vanishes itself or themselves. So this therapeutic approach is there in Tractatus.
এটা বাবা কোন ট্র্যাক্টরসের কোয়া গলা
dissolving
ইত্যাদি
হ্যাঁ স্যার তো Sir, philosophical in Tractatus se koi the philosophical problems can be it cannot
are not solved, they are dissolved because the kodu gala Tractatus re.
Sir, Tractatus ଅଛି sir ମୁଁ exactly ମନେ ପଡୁନି sir ସେଇ approach ଟାକୁ ନେଇକି Phil Hitchinson ବି କହିଛନ୍ତି କି the therapeutic approach is there in the Tractatus, because the philosophical problems cannot be solved, it can be dissolved.
और textual evidence के भी देखिए discussion करियो.
Okay sir.
Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Patra. Hello, Lakshmana. Hello.
Hey, Godavarish sir, Dr. Bra, Lakshmana.
See, when you talk about analytic method or dialectical method, and all these are methods, can you distinguish these methods from speculative method or method with regard to doubt? Can you is there any difference or they are of the same type? It is a very it is not a very scholarly question, but suppose a student asks you in the class, what is your answer?
Sir, actually there is a difference between the different methods, among the different methods.
No, how would speculation or doubt be a method if this is a question? How do you address this question? Doubt is a doubt. Speculation is a speculation.
Sir,
why should it be a method?
Method means they, by this speculation, they want to know the truth of reality.
But how is it a method?
To know the nature.
Do you feel that the use of the word method with doubt and speculation is same like the word method used for analytical or dialectical?
All are same.
All are same?
No, not same, but they approach There are
Like how is my question is very simple. How is speculation a method?
Because this
See, you can use dialectical method you can use, like in the Socratic dialogues, even, Plato talks about it, how to teach ethics to the Narcissists. How you use dialectics as a method. They use, this is the way that has been used. Analytical method, phenomenological method, hermeneutic method, but speculation as a method.
Speculative as a method, speculation is the basis of a system building. So,
yes,
because all speculative philosophers, they are system builders. So that is why speculative method is being considered as a method for building the system.
Like, but
all the philosophers over the history of philosophy.
Like that is the basis of philosophizing. Speculation is used as a tool for philosophization. But is it a method? My question is, as he asked, is therapeutic is a method? Like same, like whatever has been, they have spoken speculative method, it is used. But is speculation a method like analysis is a method? Like
now, when proper methods are absent, when proper methods are absent, then speculation comes in to fill the gap. But is that a method?
Is that a method? No, let us think together. I'm not telling a Lakshman to answer. Let us think it together. Like, is it a method?
It is not a method at all.
It is not a method. Like, this is what I think later on, Strawson and others have also spoken about it in a very different way. Okay, I think we should go to the next speaker. If
Sure.
Thank you, Lakshman, Dr. Lakshman.
Thank you, sir, for more clarification.
Next is ethics and social philosophy, and Dr. Nrushingha Charan Samantaray, head of the Department of Philosophy, SBM College, Jagatsinghpur, will come up with his presentation.
Okay.
Okay, sir. So, thank you all present in this virtual mode. First of all, my respect to all my teachers, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, the Vice President of this association, Professor Saroj Kumar Mahanti, the President, AOPA, Professor Prafullo Kumar Mahapatra, the advisor of AOPA, and respected chairperson of this section, Professor Godavarish Mishra sir, my dear Lakshman Kumar Patra, who is behind the screen as the organizing secretary, and my respect to Bhaskar sir, Boston sir, they are the pioneer, the soldiers behind this function, making it a great grand success. My dear students and all participants, my paper is entitled Value Paradigm in Social Structure. In this paper, my sole aim is to bring out the relationship between ethics, social science, and social philosophy. First of all, I attempt to demonstrate the relationship between ethics and social science, and then the relationship between social science and social philosophy. And finally, I have to correlate ethics with social philosophy in the light of individual good at par with social good. During the discussion, the concept of value, its different levels, intrinsic and extrinsic values, the principles of choice of values, etc., will come to be discussed in details, along with an analogical interpretation of truth, beauty, and good in relation to individual soul and society in the concept of Platonic triad and Socratic trinity. Finally, my honest submission is that the highest good, that is self-realization, consists of good and pleasant, whose value is even more than good. In the evolutionary process, apart from non-living beings, the behavior of living organism is end-specific. Both the organic and hyperorganic ends are in one way or other partly determined by internality and partly determined by externality. The moral agent exercises free choice and free will. Free will consists in fully exercising one's choice and expressing one's freedom in terms of behavior within a limited realm. It is true that the activities of men are highly determined, not only from the perspectives of karmic determinism, but also from the standpoint of social responsibility. But this is only half the truth. The other half consists of his freedom, and man, since man is a combination of freedom and determinism. Man being a rational animal, the animal intents and conscience in men are not fully one under the control of the other. A hockey player, for example, is supposed to use his stick to strike the ball, but not the leg of the fellow players. Instead of striking the ball, however, the players strike at the fellow players, violating the rules of the play. The players can and misuse their freedom. The play is the occasion where the player is free to exercise his freedom, but at the same time, he is equally responsible for his action. Man being essentially rational at the core, the instinctive emotions help to completely arrest it, though all emotional elements cannot be rationally refuted. The player is both the ethical and social being. His freedom is strictly adhered to his responsibility. The play is the social occasion where the player finds his fullest expression and at the same time bound by the norms of the play. Both the player and the play are tied up together by the normative principles, that is the rule of the play. Similarly, the society is the field where the individual lives and enjoys his freedom, but at the same time conditioned by social sanctions and laws. The relationship between ethics, that is the science of human good, and social science, that is the science of society, is often conceived as cordial and complementary, but not conflicting. In order to prove the effectiveness of ethical values, social situation provides the occasion. Though social science is a study of social behavior of man in a particular social units, but it is founded on certain ethical norms with a view to give a check and balance to irregularities results out of unconditioned human freedom. Though society and social institutions provide a platform for complete expression of essential nature of man. It is needless to say that the major portion of one's mental and moral growth are brought about in and through society. Again, social progress depends on the moral growth of an individual. Social science is a major category of academic discipline that study human society and social relationship in terms of economic, political, psychological, historical, and social aspects of man. Race, gender, class, culture, technology, and human behavior, and some other concepts are relevant to all social sciences insofar as these phenomena mostly influence our social relationship. In the history of human society, there are cases of conflict between people belonging to different race, gender, class, and culture. While social science deals with social behavior that reflects in customs, habits, manners, etc. of the collective body, ethics deals with individual behavior. Social behavior includes the relations, the roles, and whatever people do, make, think, feel, and believe that is collective. Ethics is the study of guiding principles of human behavior, whereas social science merely describe human social behavior. On the other hand, social philosophy deals with individual behavior in relation to social good. While ethics deals with individual good, social philosophy deals with common good of man as a social being. It focuses attention on the unit of mankind and human progress from the perspectives of cosmic love and non-violence. It shows that individual good is deeply involved in the realization of common good. It shows the value on which social progress of man depends. It sets the higher ideals for the guidance of conduct of man for the pursuit of highest social good. It encourages into right or good of man and society. Social science studies the origin, growth, and development of social groups. It investigates the habits, manners, customs, and institutions of the human society in all its stages of development, from the savage stage to civilized. On the other hand, social philosophy is the study of society and social institutions from the perspectives of what is good for the society as well as for the individual members. Ethics is closely related to social philosophy insofar as the highest good of an individual cannot be conceived apart from society, since individuals are interdependent members of social organization. The personal good, in order to be conceived as supreme good, it must be in harmony with common good or social good. The conduct of individual is part and parcel of social conduct, which is determined by habits, manners, customs, etc. Thus, ethics must depend upon social science in order to assess the impact of its own principles in the intended social context. Similarly, social science also depends upon ethics and social philosophy in order to consider the moral worth of social behavior as manifested in manners, customs, and habits. Again, ethics must depend upon social philosophy for testing of individual good in the parameter of social good. Ethics is the set of moral principles that guides a person's behavior. These morals are shaped by social norms, cultural practices, and religious influences. Social philosophy evaluates collective habits, customs, traditions, and various social institutions, reflecting upon what is right, what is wrong, what is good, and what is bad. Social philosophy believes that society is the field for ethical improvements. It gives emphasis on volitional aspects. All that we need is the clearness of what ought to do instead of what ought to know. The social philosophy examines questions about the foundations of social institutions, social behavior, and interpretations of the society in terms of ethical values rather than empirical relations. It tries to find out the basic laws which operates in the society and influence human behavior. In the Western civilization, we find traces of social philosophy in Plato's Republic. Plato depicted the picture of an ideal society. He classified people of the society into three categories according to their talent, that is, rulers, warriors, and workers. Plato stated that philosophers must be the king. In this context, the Platonic triad and Socrates' trinity will be discussed in details later on. Aristotle's social philosophy is more realistic. For him, the chief aim of the state is to produce good citizens who can perform their ethical duties in a better way. In the 19th and 20th century, social philosophy became more comprehensive, and its aim was to interpret society with reference to the essential social unity of mankind. Value is the chief concern of both ethics and social philosophy, with the only difference is that ethics deals with individual value while social philosophy deals with collective value. But unless there is a synthesis between individual value and social value, Neither the moral progress of the individual nor the welfare of the society is conceivable. The term value is an economic concept assigned to an object that satisfies human want or desire. Desire has no value in itself. Value lies with the object. On the other hand, human existence is value-centric. It is only human beings who can value things, relations, actions from the standpoint of rightness, wrongness, goodness, badness, viciousness, and virtuousness. In ethics, value is assigned only to an action which serves some end or purpose. The end or purpose towards which human actions are directed is said to be good. Good may mean a means to an end or an end in itself. The highest good means the highest end, and ethics is said to be the highest good or summum bonum of human life. Value and good are not synonymous terms. All that has value may not be good, but whatever is considered as good has a value. Thomas Hobbes says that there is no good in general. He subscribes the subjective doctrine of good. What is desired by me is good for me, and what is desired by you is good for you. But from the subjective doctrine of good, he proceeds to an objective account of right. What is right, which is commanded by the state, and that is wrong, which is forbidden by it. Since man is naturally selfish, the political law is the only moral standard. This position is opposed to popular notion of good and evil. That is, what is really good is good for all, and it is uniformly good and independent of an individual's appetites and desires. According to John Dewey, good is not an object of desire, rather it is the object of reflective desire. A person may instantly desire many objects that would injure him or others, but they are not good. Only those objects that are desired by a person after careful reflection that are really good. Thus, whatever one desires has a value, but whatever one desires is not always good. Thus, the desire theory of value, that what we desire has a value, is abandoned by John Dewey. For him, good is not an object of any desire, but it is an object of reflective desire. It is what is approved by reason. Anything that has positive value is said to be good, and anything that has negative value is said to be evil. The term good etymologically means conducive to end. End is the satisfaction of desire. There is hierarchy of ends, so also there is hierarchy of good, with the highest good at the apex. In the hierarchy of goods, the relative goods have instrumental value or extrinsic value, whereas the absolute good is intrinsic in nature. Unlike relative goods, the absolute good is an end in itself, but not a means to an end. However, the highest end is an organized unit of all the lower ends. W.M. Urban classified values into 8 categories corresponding to 3 different levels of the self. Bodily, economic, and recreation values satisfy the wants of what is called bodily self. The values of association and character satisfy the wants of what is called the social self. The aesthetic, intellectual, and religious values satisfy the craving of the spiritual self, that is beauty, truth, and holy. These values are coming under 2 broad categories, that is organic and hyperorganic. Again, hyperorganic value is divided into values of sociality and spiritual values. Bodily, economic, and recreation values are organic. Association and character values are social values. Aesthetic, intellectual, and religious values are spiritual values. Values of sociality are higher than organic values, and spiritual values are higher than social values. The organic values are primarily instrumental rather than intrinsic. Food, wealth, play, etc. are not valuable by themselves. They serve as a means to seek bodily, social, and spiritual value. The values of association and character have both instrumental and intrinsic value. They are good in themselves and also means to self-realization. friendship, love, courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom are good in themselves and also means to self-realization. Spiritual values are basically intrinsic in nature. Intellectual values like learning has value in itself. The religious values like prayer has value of its own. The aesthetic, intellectual, and religious values are said to be over individual values because they satisfy the deeper craving of spiritual self. But these over individual values may also serve some other ends and may be regarded as instrumental. Aesthetic values such as painting, music, etc., in a way improve our understanding of nature, understanding each other, and also serves humanity in their clean vision of reality. Intellectual values like knowledge also contributes for improvement in the conditions of human life, enrichment of human culture, and increase of material comforts. Similarly, religious values may be instrumental since the religious man, because of his faith on God, should be a better man in every task that he undertakes. Absolute faith on God inspires him to love mankind because he has the realization that every form of life is nothing but manifestation of the Supreme. Since sense of ideation enables him to love one and hate none, one and all and hate none, and make this earth a kingdom of God. Love of God should find expression in loving service of humanity. Social philosophy sincerely aims at instrumentality of these values from the higher perspectives so as to make it a means for collective well-being, that is Lokosangraha. Moral value is the supreme value which also includes the over individual values like aesthetic, intellectual, and religious values. Sometimes moral values consist in moral excellence or virtue like courage, temperance, justice, love, wisdom, which are good in themselves and also means to self-realization. Social philosophy suggests us to follow three principles which are called norms of values. In general, values with intrinsic nature are preferable to values with extrinsic nature. Permanent values are higher than transient values, and productive values are higher than unproductive values. By these principles, the spiritual values like truth, beauty, holiness have intrinsic worth. Therefore, they are preferable to other values of extrinsic nature. The values of association, character, and the spiritual values like knowledge, beauty, virtue, etc., are more permanent than sensual bodily pleasure. The social values are more durable than the individual values. The hyper-organic values are more productive for the individual as well as for the society. The spiritual goods of knowledge, beauty, virtue, holiness, etc. become multiply in distribution and suffer no loss in division. To share these things with others is not to degrade one's self, but rather to enrich and expand oneself. These values are not only about individual but international. The more universal they are, the more productive they become. Association between man and man, friendship, love, brotherhood, all these are more intrinsic, more permanent, and more productive than bodily and economic values. The human self is over social in its interest and seeks permanent satisfaction in the realization of impersonal ideals such as truth, beauty, and good, and the holy. Social values are subordinate to these spiritual values or moral values, which emphasizes love and service to humanity. The three ideals of truth, beauty, and good satisfy the three aspects of the self, that is intellectual, emotional, and volitional. Just as cognition, emotion, and volitions are three inseparable aspects of the soul, involving one another, so also truth, beauty, and good are inseparably related with each other. Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, Sat, Chit, Ananda correspond to truth, beauty, and goodness. Platonic triad and Socrates trinity espouse the inseparable relation between these three concepts that is truth, beauty, and good, which equally correspond to an individual soul as well as three classes of human society, with a conviction that the moral growth of an individual and society is the result of harmonious synthesis of this triad. Plato imagines three parts of the soul. The higher part is rational and the lower part is irrational. Further, the lower part is divided into noble and ignoble parts. Corresponding these three parts, there are three faculties, that is, faculty of reason, spirit, and appetite. The reflective thinking belongs to reason. Courage, love, emotions belong to noble parts, that is spirit. Instinct and animal spirit belong to ignoble part called appetite. In Republic, using appetite, spirit, and reason structure of the individual soul, Plato introduced the triadic class structure in society. The productive group, that is the workers, farmers, merchants, carpenters who provide services, correspond to the appetite part of the soul. The other productive group, that is warriors, the strong and brave, correspond to the spirit part of the soul. The governing group, that is the rulers or the philosophers king, are intelligent, rational, and self-controlled, well suited to make decisions for the community, correspond to reason part of the soul. Truth, goodness, and beauty for Plato were divine concepts, corresponds with three aspects of the soul. Truth involves our rational capacity, good involves our emotional, ethical, and moral capacity, and beauty involves our desire and aesthetic capacity. For Plato, good is not simply a thing or a value, but the one and absolute reality, one in many and many in one, the highest ideal which covers all the ideals. Good is the universal priority in which all true things participate and from which they exist. That is true and good. What is true and good is beautiful. Truth literally means non-concealment or disclosure. Truth in this sense is the disclosedness of state of affairs which exhibits itself and is therefore perceived in its actuality. Good designates the goal, the purpose, or the meaning of existence. Beauty generally rendered as beautiful, healthy, excellent, strong, or good. Plato used these terms, truth, beauty, and good, in the political and social context. Every individual ought to cultivate himself in the same way that the sculptor works to make his statue beautiful. An artist cuts up, polishes, and purifies the statue until he gets it with all the marks of beauty. In the same way, one can remove all the superfluous and obscure ideas from the soul and purify it till virtue shines forth upon our sight. Sculpting the soul results in a more beautiful humanity, which is achieved through Platonic triad of beauty, truth, and goodness. Beauty is conceived as the integration of intellectual and aesthetic faculties. Truth is the result of logical exercise of rational faculties which discloses the nature of the world. Goodness is found in the human capacity to feel compassion for others and thereby contribute to the betterment of the society. Observing the patterns in nature becomes an opportunity for us to understand the universe and reach a heightened cognitive and effective state. In its universality, beauty offers a means of engaging with the world, providing a common basis upon which the positive social relationships can be developed. Beauty provides an opportunity to bond individuals, facilitated positive human interaction, and multinational understanding of human experience, cultivating the enlightened values of equality and fraternity. For Socrates, truth is revealed by means of reason alone, whereas truth instructs the soul about the good and beauty motivates the soul towards it. Truth is the intrinsic value which satisfies the intellect. The knowledge of the truth has intrinsic value so for us. Beauty is the intrinsic value which satisfies our emotions. Creation and appreciation of beauty consists in aesthetic value. Moral value of goodness or oughtness is the intrinsic value which satisfies our volitions. It is accompanied by moral obligation and moral sentiments, which is lacking in the consciousness of truth and beauty. Moral evaluation of conduct depends upon the motive and intention of the agent, but understanding of truth and appreciation of beauty has no reference to personality, motive, and intention. The highest good is the supreme good, which would give complete satisfaction to rational being. Virtue or moral excellence or perfection is the highest good to which only the rational beings aim at. Mackenzie defines highest good as the perfectly ordered universe. It is the highest moral good because it is chosen by rational beings and gradually achieved by their free effort. It is an object of rational choice. The highest moral good is a personal good because it aims at highest welfare of a person. It leads to his complete self-fulfillment, self-realization, self-expression, and self-development. The highest moral good is a universal good as it is the common good of all mankind. Thus, ethics which deals with individual good must be in harmony with the social good and vice versa. The highest good has been conceived in various ways. For hedonist, pleasure is the highest good which ought to be pursued for its own sake as it has its intrinsic value. For Immanuel Kant, goodwill itself is intrinsically good, but goodwill is the will that wills what is good. Kant's conviction is that the highest good must be an object of rational choice or which is free from non-rational elements such as emotions, passions, etc. For the Eudaemonist, the highest good consists in self-realization or harmonious development of various faculties of self, that is bodily self, social self, and spiritual self, in intercourse with the society. It consists in the realization of rational self or social self through the transformation of the lower, narrow, sentient, or individual self. It satisfies the bodily self, the social self, and the spiritual self. Self-realization is the realization of values of life in the proper relation to each other. There are two basic set of values in life. One is ethical value of goodness or morality, and the other is material value of pleasant. The former is technically called.
Dr. Samantaray, will you please summarize now? We will have some questions.
Sir, within 5 minutes I will complete the topic. Okay, sir. The former is technically called Shreya, meaning the good, preferable, and the latter is called Shreya, prayer, or pleasurable. Morality or dharma comes under good, wealth and satisfaction comes under pleasant. In actual life, there is dichotomy between preferable and pleasurable. Sometimes people totally suppress the pleasurable in favor of good or preferable. But the tantric seers, Kashmir Saivism, are quite clear that the value system that is merely good and there is no element of pleasure in it is not practical. Therefore, they search to discover a value system that synthesizes within itself both good and pleasant, or truth and beauty, and the good of oneself and the good of others. This synthesis is found in what is called self-realization or moksha. Moksha is not an outwardly value, but the ground of overall success in life. Self-realization incorporates within itself both morality and satisfaction of desires. Morality naturally present in moksha for two reasons. First, the self that is attaining moksha is naturally good. That is why it is called Shiva, which literally means the benign. Secondly, the state of moksha or self-realization, one feels one's unity with all. He becomes one with all. It is quite natural for such a person to do good to all. It is only ignorance which creates the sense of duality. The sense of duality obstructs the self in its way to do good for all. When the sense of duality is dispelled and one's unity with all is realized, then the universal love is attained. One can explode a person only when one considers himself or herself as other than oneself. But if one considers that person a part of oneself, how can one exploit him or her? A self-realized person cannot exploit or harm anyone, as self-realization is a state of perfect universal love. On the contrary, a self-realized person will help all. Thus, self-realization is a state of natural and spontaneous morality. In self-realization, one's best interest and the good of others become one. It is a state that at once both good and pleasant. In our empirical evidence, we can find at least the one phenomena that is an example of the synthesis of both good and pleasant, that is the phenomena of love. In love, the good of the lover and the good of the beloved person become one. Besides prompting beneficial activity towards the beloved person, love gives immense pleasure, happiness, and joy to the lover himself or herself. The love becomes universal when the more one realizes the self. The more we realize the self, the greater is the universal flow of love in us. Moksha is really the synthesis of both good and pleasant, that thus its value is higher than even good. With this much, I end my paper. Thank you, sir. I hand over the mic to Professor Mishra.
Yeah. So, Dr. Samantaray, you have taken us on a tour to, give us a broad range of, concepts and conceptual analysis on the problematic of morality, ethics, and values. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Now, his paper is open for questions and comments. One is from Nandini. She has already raised her hands. And Nandini, start. Nandini, are you there? Okay, I think she is not there. Over to others, please.
Sir, I marked the question raised by Nandini madam. That is.
You have got the question. Okay, please answer.
In what sense ethics is concerned with individual values, as you claimed? How would you argue for your claim? My claim is from the standpoint of the definition of ethics, as ethics is the science of highest good of man, and sometimes highest good of man is also highest social good. From that standpoint, my viewpoint is individual good, which ethics is mainly concerned with individual good in contrast with the social philosophy. This is my honest submission.
Okay, others, please, if anybody wants to take part, Dr. Ghosh.
I have one simple question: that can we make a difference between common good and good of all, as we make a distinction between general will and will of all?
Okay, sir. This is a very nice question. Of course, common good sometimes is a good of all. But so far as our knowledge is concerned, it is only the good which is approved by the region. The group of people who are mostly blessed with the power of thinking, rational power, they choose the right things. But there are people in the society, they cannot accept it as the common good.
Rightly said that common good is same as a good of all, whereas general will is not the will of all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Anybody else would like to have anything to say?
Sir, I have a question. Yes, sir. Sir, I have a question. Yes, sir. You have said that highest good of man. Is ethics is all about highest good of man?
Yes, ethics is the science of highest end or highest good of man. It is not concerned with any particular end. But however, concerning with the highest end, some other lower ends should be taken into consideration. The highest end is the realization of all the lower ends. as far as some of the philosophical systems takes it into account. At the state of higher ends, all the lower ends must be realized. It is not an isolated end, it also takes into account the lower ends, such as our physical ends must be fulfilled, otherwise we cannot survive. So highest end, that is moral ends, that is self-realization, is not isolatedly, is not distinctly achieved. It can be taken into account by taking into account all the individual ends, physical needs, social needs, all these things.
Thank you, sir.
Chairperson, sir. Hello.
Dr.
Hello.
Samantaray, I have a small question.
Okay, sir.
Acha, somebody is asking, Pragya is asking, what is, Pragya, would you please tell the question?
What exactly the definition of a self-realization?
Yeah. What is the definition of self-realization?
Yes, there are so many different ways we can conceive this very notion, self-realization. In our Upanishadic philosophy, self-realization is conceived as realization of one and the same self in all individual bodies. From ethical point of view, self-realization means realization of the bodily self, the social self, the spiritual self, and the moral self, all these things. Different philosophers, different groups of philosophy define self-realization in different ways.
Is there anybody who is speaking about the realization of a social self?
Yes, sir. Is
there any philosopher who has spoken about realization of the social self?
Yes, it is the perfectionism or hedomonist who speaks about the realization of the social self.
Okay. Okay.
Chairperson, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
I have a query. I have a small query.
Yeah, please. Please, Professor Das.
Nrushingha has summarized his whole paper in one sentence in the conclusion that freedom or mukti consists in combining pleasure and good, I think you said.
Okay, sir.
Mukti is the combination of pleasure and good. How is that?
Yeah, he
how
says
could they be combined, and how mukti results as a combination of that?
Yeah, Professor Das. He said that mukti or self-realization consists in achieving a state which is pleasant, happy, and joyful. That is the three things he used. And your question is very,
Nrushingha,
very,
please read the last sentence. Nrushingha, please read the last sentence.
Sir, my humble submission is that this self-realization is just state of universal love. In that state, one both he achieves his own satisfaction, feel joy, and also goodness, and also
no, Dr. Samantaray. Dr. Samantaray, Professor Das is asking, how do you take all these three concepts that you have told together? Are they one and the same or different? Can we speak them in different terms? Like you have said, pleasure, happiness, and joy. What is the difference between pleasure, happiness, and joy? Are they same or they one leads to another? How do you perceive it?
In the framework of ethical values,
good is mukti, he said.
Dharma, artha,
yeah, he said, yeah.
Sir?
Yes. Dr. Samantaray, please.
In the framework of scheme of values, ethical values, dharma, artha, kama, moksha.
No, let us not go to that. Okay. Yeah, please carry on.
Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. The dharma concept coming under good, and artha and kama coming under pleasant. But moksha is a state where both good and pleasant are taken together, are achieved. That is the state of universal love. That is conceived by Tantrism or Kashmir Shaivism.
Kashmir Shaivism also says that enjoying the pleasure itself is moksha.
Yes, sir.
And for them,
like that,
combination of both. Yeah, like no combination. The world itself, the enjoyment, in the enjoyment lies the moksha. Moksha is don't perceive moksha.
It is not
as a
outwardly
separate
value.
entity.
It is not an outwardly value, sir.
Yeah. So why do you take these are different?
No,
Dr.
sir,
Samantaray,
they are not different.
pleasure, happiness, and joy, as you know, the states of mukti are they different?
No, sir.
Are they synonym?
No, sir, they are not different. Conceiving one without other is impracticable. That is not practical. That is my viewpoint.
So your viewpoint is a result of the admixture of Plato, Aristotle, Kashmir Shaivism and Upanishads.
No, sir, I just want to relate them how Plato introduced the triad concept in different classes of society with the soul as well as three ideals, truth, beauty and good. This is my honest summary.
No,
I have.
the thing is, when you are bringing the concept of joy, that will create a problem, because whether it is immanent or transcendent, then that question will come. Because joy, don't bring joy into this.
No, I never use the words of joy. I just use the word good and pleasant.
Yeah, you can do that, but if you bring joy, then you have to bring several other situations like that Turiya concept, that Turiya concept of Turiya, which is a state of bliss, is a state of joy, ananda. Then all these things will come.
Ananda and pleasant are different things.
Yeah, so that is.
May I say something here?
Yes, sir.
Actually, I need a clarification, and also I have an observation. The clarification is this: are you saying that ethics and social philosophy are two distinct disciplines? If you think they are distinct, then what about practical ethics? How will you put that? And observation is, you have made so many claims in your paper, but I don't see any philosophical reasoning supporting those claims.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
So in my paper, ethics and social philosophy are closely related. Insofar as the practical ethics is concerned, applied ethics is concerned, it is the social philosophy which tests the individual values. Whether it is in harmony with the social value or not, that is tested by social philosophy. So ethics and social philosophy are intimately related. While we are contacting between social and ethical philosophy deals with what is highest good of individuals, whereas social philosophy deals with social or collective good. This is the only difference. But actually, they are closely related.
Okay. Any other question? Nandini, you want to ask some questions? Nandini? Are you back?
There is another question in the chat box.
No, Nandini has raised a question. Nandini has raised. Are you there, Nandini? Or your hand? I see you have raised your hand. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Professor Das, you want to ask something?
No. I was telling that there is a remark by Jayanti Sahu in the chat box.
What is the remark? Jayanti, would you please tell the remarks Jayanti?
Jayanti is telling that Hegel is talking about social self.
Yeah.
Hello.
Jayanti, yes.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir,
Show
no,
your face. Put on your camera.
No.
You don't
sir,
want us to see you?
No, not today, sir.
Okay.
Are you in the kitchen? Are you in the kitchen, Jayanti?
No, sir, not. I am not in the kitchen.
Okay, wherever you are, you don't we are it's okay, absolutely fine.
Sir, no, you just asked, is there any philosopher who said about the social self? So I thought so that's the reason why I said yes.
There are
Hegel,
large number of philosophers who have spoken about social self.
Yes, but
not one or two. One of the major votaries of this is Karl Marx.
Yes, sir.
Why do you go to others? Marx speaks about society at first, like to perceive him in the perspective of ethics, like how that at the taking end the society is being relegated to whatever state they are in. Yeah, Jayanti, please tell.
Yes, sir, I do agree with you that Karl Marx spoke about social self, but his notion of self is something in fact, earlier Marx talked about little bit about the self, but
No, like I am talking from the society standpoint. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, go
yes,
ahead.
sir, but yes, sir, but the notion of the self is strongly, it is there in the existential philosophers. They do talk about continental philosophy. They do talk about the social self. Hegel.
Like who among the continentals speak about social self?
Sir,
Like
yes, sir. I said that Hegel is talking about a social self, and Sartre, though, he is talking about a kind of individual self. So individual self, but the extreme form of social self is there when he spoke about master slave dialectics and his phenomenology of spirit, and that where he said that it is he makes a distinction between the human desire and animal desire, and when he speaks about human desire, he brings about that how it is important to two classes important to recognize each other. That recognition is a kind of development, a kind of unfoldment of the spirit, and you can reach to the level of absolute idea, and that is a kind of dialectical method he is applying there, that being, non-being, and becoming, in the state of becoming. So that is a kind of self we are talking about even within the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, though it is a kind of different altogether. The witness consciousness,
self-centric,
the modal consciousness, when they talk about some kind of bodily self and social self implicitly present also there.
I like a small difference with your even there they don't talk about social self unless somebody
Yes, sir.
talks about like Buddha talks about Sarva Mukti, like that type of a concept, unless that is being brought in. Otherwise, the individual reigns supreme in the philosophy of Advaita. As it from the very seeing it from a surface level. Thank you, Jayanti. Let us go to any other question. If you have any, Professor Ghosh, Ranjit Ghosh, anything you would like to ask?
Please offer your comments and then we will wind up.
The thing is, as Professor Majhi has already said this, he has touched many things, but the thing is just to relate those things in such a way so that we can get the idea of that there is a close connection between ethics and social philosophy, and without social philosophy is always having some moral dimensions. Because we know there are social philosophies without having any moral dimensions. So these things he has to clarify. This is a small observation. Thank you.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you, Dr. Ghosh and Rambabu. This is a nice observation. He has to crystallize this and streamline his paper than talking such a lot of things. The paper loses its focus. Very well said, Dr. Majhi and Dr. Ghosh.
Sir, I have a comment.
It should be focused. I agree very much. Yeah. Rajaram, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. We have discussed about from every standpoint, whether it is Indian philosophy or we have discussed about Western philosophy as well related to this topic. I want to ask a question, or I want to know the point of view that how the topic is related to Bhagavad Gita, because we have discussed every standpoint. So I think this is a 2-3 lines will be suffice on this.
Would you like to say, Dr. Samantaray, how
Yes,
is
sir.
it?
Of course, it is related to Bhagavad Gita when we are speaking about social good. That is, of course, refer to collective good, and that
Yes,
collective
sir.
good can be achieved.
Yes, sir. Just I want to know your wisdom.
That is to participate in collective well-being, that is Lokasangraha activities, and social good is nothing apart from social collective good, Lokasangraha activities.
Right. You have already, I think you have mentioned just cursorily that this Lokasangraha and which is implied in it, this Sarvabhuta Hita. So all these things you have mentioned, but those things are not properly articulated. That is the problem here. Thank you.
This will take so much paper.
Dr. Samantaray, please take these comments in the right spirit and try to work out.
No.
It is too too descriptive in the sense, always a lot of repetition in other words, and unless you focus, it does not qualify to become a paper in the right understanding.
Dr. Ganesh Prasad Das has raised his hand, so he should.
The focus would be these comments. Those comments in the right. Yeah, sir,
Sir, namaskar, sir. Sir, with your due with your due permission, sir. Well, I don't have any question relating to this section because the questions are taken up. I have something to say regarding the last paper when you said that how to take speculation as a method, sir. Well, I'm not talking on this paper, sir, the last one. Sir, I have something to say. With your permission, if you allow, I'll talk 2 to 3 lines.
Please. Like you are always allowed, please. Like
sir,
talking. I have not 1 minute. I'm not. This has been spoken. My point is whether we can take them and the same way as we take analysis as a method, dialectics as a method, phenomenology as a method, or hermeneutics as a method. That is all my
question. My
Yeah,
point
please.
is, sir, in the framing of the scientific laws or even the refinement of scientific laws, hypothesis does play a vital role. Without a hypothesis, we cannot conceive of any theory or even a law. So, the very process of hypothesis building is a part of a speculative outlook. So, seen in that light, speculation cannot be avoided because it is much needed for a constructive thinking.
One of the conditions of framing a hypothesis is that there should not be wild speculations. So hypothesis means under thesis. Hypo means under. It is not speculation.
See, the doubt and speculation, all these things are foundations for thinking, and we are not brushing them aside. We are not doing away with them. Yeah.
But speculations, well, sir, well, even though we understand that, what Professor Das says, well, they are not wild guesses. Even when you talk of speculation as a method, we cannot talk of any wild guess as a speculation and bring that to philosophy. So that's not what we are doing.
Like let us hypothesis, presupposition, speculation.
So hypothesis is not a method. In scientific inquiry, hypothesis is not a method; it is a stage. There are methods. Methods are other than hypothesis. Observation is other than the method. Observation is a stage. Hypothesis is a stage. That is stages of scientific inquiry.
There are two
you must
things.
Distinguish stages of scientific inquiry, methods of scientific inquiry.
Yeah, exactly. There are two things in thinking, preparing a topic. One is method, another is the content. Okay. Now, when you talk about speculation and all that, these are all starting points. I am not contesting that idea, but is it a same type of like method, let us say that it is a method, like dialectics is as a method, where you
No,
apply it.
the thing is, when we start our reading of Critique of Pure Reason, then we try to criticize the earlier two philosophies, systems like
Yes.
rationalism and empiricism as speculative philosophy, as system builders. And Kant was first to put forward the critical philosophy, and thereby from there actually we get this critical method. So speculative itself has become a method, but instead of method we can use speculative philosophies. Both
Yes, speculative
and
philosophy is
rationalism.
okay. See,
They are speculative philosophies, but
when Kant brushes aside the empiristic and rationalistic standpoints, he calls them dogmatic, not speculative.
Yes.
Yeah, he calls them dogmatic. See, this is like, nobody says that presuppositions are wrong, speculations are wrong, or hypothesis is not to be there. We are not talking about that. We are talking about whether we can equate these things, or we can take them in the same parlance. That was the question, Dr. Narayan Rao. I think,
Yes, sir. I got it, sir. I got it, sir. Well, we cannot take them in the same parallels the way
thank
you
you
take
for
the
your
dialectic method or any other
intervention.
method
Yeah.
whatsoever. Thank you,
We
sir.
thank you for your intervention. And sir, Saroj sir, କ'ଣ କହୁଥିଲେ ସାର୍ ଆପଣ? ବହୁତ ଦିନ ପରେ ସାର୍ ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ଦେଖା ହେଉଛି, ଆପଣ ମୁହଁଟା ଟିକେ ଦେଖାନ୍ତୁ. Sir, you want to say something? Professor Saroj Mahanti, I think he has left. Okay.
ନାଇଁ ସାର୍ ଥିଲେ ନା ଫାର୍ଷ୍ଟ ସେସନ ଟା ପୁରା ସାର୍ ଥିଲେ, ମୁହଁ ଦେଖେଇକି ଥିଲେ। ସାର୍ ମିସ୍ କରିଛନ୍ତି।
Yeah, I missed. Okay, because I was
ଏବେ ବି ସାର୍ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଲାଇନରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି।
ସାର୍ ଲାଇନରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଦେଖା ଯାଉନାହାନ୍ତି। Anyway, Professor Das, anybody else is left out or session is over?
ନା ସେସନ ଇଜ ଓଭର ହେଇନି। ଆପଣ ଯାହା କହିବା କଥା ଟିକେ କହିଦିଅନ୍ତୁ, ତାପରେ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ କଥା
we have already discussed and it was a very good
ବଢିଆ ହେଲା। ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ଖାଲି ଗୋଟେ ଅନୁରୋଧ ରହିଲା ଯେ ଆସନ୍ତାକାଲି ଜେନେରାଲ ବଡି ମିଟିଂ ଅଛି 3ଟା ରୁ 4ଟା। ସରି, ମୁଁ ଭୁଲ କହିଲି। ଆସନ୍ତାକାଲି ଏକ୍ଜିକ୍ୟୁଟିଭ ବଡି ମିଟିଂ ଅଛି 4:30 ରୁ 5ଟା। ଆପଣ ଆସିବେ।
ହଉ ସାର୍,
ଆସିବେ। ତାପରେ ପରଦିନ ସେସନଟା ଅଛି ଆପଣ ପ୍ରିଜାଇଡ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଡକ୍ଟ୍ରିନ୍ ଅଫ କର୍ମ ଉପରେ। ସେଇଟା ହଉଛି 10ଟା ରୁ 11:30। ଆପଣ ଆସିବେ। ଏବଂ ସେଇଦିନ ପୁଣି ମିଟିଂ ଅଫ ଦି ଜେନେରାଲ ବଡି ଅଛି 3ଟା ରୁ 4ଟା। ଆପଣ ଆସିବେ, ରହିବେ 5ଟା ବେଳ ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ।
ଫୋନ କରିଦଉଥିବେ, ନହେଲେ ଗୋଟେ ମିସ୍ କଲ୍ ଦେଇଦେଲେ I will be there, sir.
ହଁ, sure sir, I will call you.
ଟିକେ ଗଲେ ଜଣେଇଦେବେ। Sorry, like I should not be telling because I am not having
now
this interview.
Over to Saroj sir.
Yes, sir.
For his observations.
Okay. So thank you all the participants. We all enjoyed your deliberations, and we should keep the philosophical spirit alive and vibrant, and hope that we would inspire the younger generation to meaningfully engage with philosophy in the days to come. Thank you all participants. Professor Das, for this opportunity to preside over this session and listen to the deliberations from the participants. Over to
we are all happy. We are all happy to have you as the chairperson of this session. You made the discussion very vibrant and alive, and we are grateful to you. And we will like to have you all through the rest of the 2 days.
Oh, I'll be
proceedings.
there, sir. I'll be there. Yeah.
So I also thank Nrushingha Samantaray, who presented the discussion and set up the proceedings. And then I thank all those who raised queries, and kept the discussion alive throughout. Thank you very much. And I thank Lakshman Patra, who is there at the controlling end to look to the right way of the proceedings. And I thank one and all once again, to meet again tomorrow at 10 a.m. So thank you very much and namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you all of you.
So we go back to our abodes where AOPA has arranged tea and snacks